Well, the haters gonna hate, 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 and the fakers gonna fake, 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 baby. I'm just gonna making luck, a Dominion podcast.
It's a shame we can't even put this in as an Easter egg.
Oh yeah, no.
That's too bad.
As a rule of thumb, if you're mentioning actual people.
Welcome to Making Luck, a Dominion podcast.
Welcome, yeah.
Hi, I'm Adam. Jake is here, and then, yeah.
I'm also Adam.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by Adams.
This isn't, it's a Jake sandwich.
It is a
Yeah,
Jake sandwich.
Or is it an
Adam
Adam
bread.
sandwich?
Well, I would normally name my sandwiches after what's in the middle of them, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it's a Jake sandwich.
It's a Jake sandwich.
With some delicious Adam
Are
bread.
we going back to the whole sandwich metaphor for the podcast?
Oh, we've come full
because
circle.
we totally could now.
Yeah, we kind of left that by the wayside, didn't we?
Welcome to Making Luck, a sandwich podcast.
Yeah, we're coming back to the sandwiches.
Sandwiches are great.
Whether you want us to or not.
My wife made some egg salad.
We got
Egg
so
salad
much.
is amazing.
I think we've gotten more negative feedback about the sandwich metaphors than any other part of the podcast.
Seriously, like, there's a lot
no
you could
problem.
criticize us for.
I know, and like
I have no problem with the sandwich metaphors.
Me neither.
Thank you.
It's a great way to explain the podcast. I don't see what the problem with it is, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah, right.
I do have to say, though, I have a problem with sandwiches. I like
Excuse
sandwiches, but I've been spoiled by warm sandwiches that I can't eat just like cold sandwiches anymore.
I love to have my bread toasted when I
Yeah.
get a sandwich, just for that little extra texture.
Yep.
But when we go to
Just to mention-
Subway, my wife and I usually split a foot long, and she does not want her bread toasted.
Can you have them toast half of it?
No.
And they'll charge you for two six
Yeah.
foots.
6 foot subs, yeah.
Yeah.
That's unreasonable.
I actually have not eaten yet today, so this is an interesting.
Oh, I made some 24-hour salad.
We can get
Ooh.
you some VP tokens.
Well, yeah, I have to earn those though.
Yeah.
So
That hasn't happened in a while, has it?
no.
Rip.
So last time on Making Luck Dominion podcast, we talked about Lookout and Loan, and we're going to
We
talk about.
did not talk about Lookout. We
We
talked about
We
research.
talked about a lot of things. All right, we talked about research and loan, and and we're going to talk about a kingdom. But before that, just so you know, this episode coming up is about like.
Do we even know what it's about?
Well, it's about committing to higher payload decks and like what the thought process is behind that and how you do it. But maybe
Well, I
you
guess
have a better way of putting it.
what happened was Adam gave me a list of topics that they were considering for future episodes.
Yeah.
And the one topic was, I think you just said, committing to higher payload decks.
Yeah.
And when I expressed interest in this topic, you expressed your frustration with people who get so close to like building a higher payload deck and then they, jump off the tracks and just fall back into big money when they're like 2 steps away from getting there. So I guess it's kind of talking about how to stay on that track and commit to it.
And for me, it's actually the opposite. For me, and like the part of this topic that interests me is the thought process of whether or not to do that. Like, so for me, it's kind of like when to commit and when to pivot. But I think we're going to end up talking about a lot of the same stuff, which is just the thought process and the tactics behind whether or not to build your deck, right?
I think it's just funny that, like, I have this experience playing games of Dominion with people in real life with physical cards. And,
Yeah.
Adam, this isn't going to be confusing at all. And Adam has an experience where, I mean,
Hey,
I
Hoppy.
assume he's... What should we call you? Just Adam? I'm okay with calling you Adam.
I prefer Adam.
All right, so
All right.
and Adam here, I'm assuming has had like a similar experience where you've run across people that are like, oh, I see these good cards, I'm going to build a deck, and then they check it out and buy Golden Province,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then, so we've had this experience, and then I've
Yeah.
had experience playing with Jake, and Jake's like, I have never seen this before ever.
That's true.
Like Jake
So,
cussed
like,
me out earlier today because this topic is f***ing stupid.
I didn't say that part, but here's the thing. I mostly play online, and I've played. I kind of joke about making alts and like doing, but like I do it sometimes, and so I played like on every end of the leaderboard at this point, so I have a pretty good idea of the online Dominion population at least, and what they do, what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, stuff like that. So, and I will say, like, the online crowd, I don't think has this problem. I think they have the opposite problem where it's assumed that the is going to be. I did the air quotes.
I'm going to bleep that out.
I did the air quotes. Okay. The high payload deck is going to be the best one, and like they don't necessarily react to what the opponent's doing or the end game positions they're being put in to maybe pivot to money or pivot for points when they should.
I guess we got to talk about then who the audience for this podcast is, because
if you're listening, you're the audience. We care. Leave a
we
comment in the
you.
comments section.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure.
Because I assume most people who are listening to a Dominion podcast are
they played Dominion
they've played
before.
Dominion before, and this is more.
If you're still listening, by the way, congratulations.
Yeah, if this
I'm
is your
really
first
surprised
foray
you
into
made-
Dominion, good luck. Let's do this.
Like I reckon. Never mind. Go ahead.
I guess I'm just saying it's. This seems like a topic more geared towards beginner players.
Sure.
And so maybe, hopefully, we can provide solutions to help you teach other people how to play the game better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
for
weird, because like normally on Making Luck, we just give you a whole bunch of bad advice. But this is
Pretty
going to be
much.
different.
It's going to be different.
It's going to happen.
We've got someone to rein us in this time.
Yep.
So
I
No
don't
pressure.
know about that. No.
No pressure, man.
no, you've got to keep us on the rails, Hoppy.
So
should've
anyway, we definitely have a coherent topic for this podcast. And now, let's talk about a kingdom from last time.
Yeah. So of course, Hoppy's gonna read it.
Yeah, go nuts, man.
So we have Beggar, Stonemason, Fortune Teller, Lone, Lookout, Necromancer, Research, Talisman, Capital, Hunting Party, and the events Triumph and Traveling Fair.
Don't forget Colony Platinum.
We've also got Colony and Platinum in this game.
Nice.
Once again, for our audio-only listeners, we have Beggar, Stonemason, Fortune Teller, Lone, Lookout, Necromancer, Research, Talisman, Capital, Hunting Party, and the events Triumph and Traveling Fair.
So
Last time I said Triumph was really, really good. I said it was definitely really good, and I definitely said that.
Okay, so what did we actually say about this kingdom when we left off on this? We were talking. We never really got too specific about what we were going to do in the mid game. We talked about what we were going to open and bickered about that a little bit, and then
We're going to bicker about it some more. Don't worry.
Right, and then we talked about the end game, and I think we both agreed that colonies were going to be the biggest steal, and Triumph was going to be tiebreaker points. I think we both kind of settled on that.
Yeah.
And that was super wrong, right?
Triumph is a lot better than that, yeah.
Yeah, I think, if anything, the colonies are the tiebreaker points. And the Triumph tends to be... Because usually, somebody goes for a big Triumph, the other guy, makes it up with colonies. And
Could be, I guess. Sure, whatever. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't, because there's some huge Triumph potential here. And people were throwing out numbers in the Discord that they got that were, 100 plus VP by turn 12. Worth noting that those were all in bot games, and I never saw that happen in an actual game against a human, which I think is significant because I don't think it's actually going to. But why don't you talk to us a little bit about how you built that deck?
Well, just because it didn't happen in any games that we played against a human, I mean, if I was doing what I thought I was going to do last time, someone would have done that against me and scored 130 points, I'll tell you. So the idea is, you want to get the starting cards out using some method that we'll argue about in a little bit. Get some hunting parties, draw a lot of cards, build a good deck. By a good deck, I mean the deck that makes a lot of money.
It draws a bunch of cards.
And draws a bunch of cards that make you money.
Yeah.
And then I thought, you're just going to buy 1, maybe 2 colonies on a turn, and that would be it. But
and you could do that.
You can. But what you can also do
Yeah.
is once you're thin, you put a capital and a talisman in the deck, and then you use that to get, 6 talismans or so. And then you research something big so you can draw a bunch of cards.
What's
and
usually
then,
something big for you?
Man, whatever's around. I researched a hunting party once, gold, necromancer, lone,
so this
something
is,
big.
This is you're willing to hurt your deck for this because you're going to win the game next turn because of it. You're banking your draw with research, using it as native village.
You're using it as research.
Yeah.
Research as native village. It's like a necromancer as a band of misfits as a research as a native village. You do that,
exactly.
And then you draw all your talismans, and you have 25 money and a bunch of buys. You traveling pair a whole bunch. You get like 8 coppers, and you gain like 40 more coppers off your talismans, and you triumph like 2 or 3 times, and you get like 40 points from each triumph. It's insane how many points you can get from just this one turn.
And this happens on like what, turn 13, 14-ish?
12 to 14 was the range where I could consistently get it to happen.
Yeah, so it's a big deal. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to outscore that with colonies. But in the games that we played against humans, there were other considerations that came up in the mid to end game, like piles got low, right? And you have to worry about not leaving. Like, you might want those last 2 talismans because you need them to do that thing that Adam just described. But if you do that, then you're not like, getting safety points, and your opponent could pile you out and like not even get those 100 points. He might get like 2 points, but they pile out and win the game. So.
Try not to lose.
Yeah, in the end, you have to get like some colonies for safety points. I don't know. Did you find first player advantage to be especially like oppressive here?
Well, I was always first player, so oppressive is not the word I would use to describe it.
I felt oppressed.
Yeah. You sure you didn't feel oppressed because I had a better opening than you?
No, that wasn't it. But you probably did play better in other ways. See, that's the problem. Is
I'm just so amazing at Dominion that no matter what I do, I win. So even
I was
if
gonna
I do
say
bad
I'm
things,
bad, but
well, I'm gonna say that. Yeah,
yeah. So
feels good, man. Let's argue about the opening.
Okay, all right. Hey, Hoppy, what would you open here?
Sorry, I haven't even really looked at the board. I know I read it.
Yeah, but that was tough, man.
Yeah, it was hard work.
You only read it like once, so
Yeah.
What would I open?
I think it's actually close.
yeah. For the record, I do too.
I might do Lookout Silver.
Okay.
That's something neither of us suggested, but I don't think it's crazy either.
It's pretty close to Lookout Fortune Teller.
Yeah.
So, like, I said
was
I was going to
suggested.
go Research Lookout. Adam, you had a different perspective.
I think Fortune Teller alone, and I feel great about this opening. Like, I feel like it's really, really good.
The main point of contention Adam and I have is that, so we both agree that the Lookout and the Lone fill very similar roles, do very similar things. They both trash a card. They both provide a little bit of potential cycling or potential bad cycling or churning or whatever you want to call it. Potentially they help you play your good cards. Potentially they stop you from
They
doing that.
trash a card, not in your hand. They
Yeah.
dig through your deck to get the card. And so sometimes that helps you and sometimes that hurts you.
Yeah, so there are merits and problems with both of those, and Adam is going to champion the Lone. Let's hear
it's
it, Adam.
better because, like, so Lone opening with the Fortune Teller. First of all, I know that Lone doesn't trash estates. On turn 3 or turn 4, whichever time I don't hit 5, I'm going to get either a Research or a Lookout, depending on what I can afford, to trash the estates. That's important. I definitely want to trash the estates, but I think opening with the Lone is good because it gives you a really good shot at hitting 5, get a hunting party in the deck early, which helps you find your trashers more often, play them more often, and get more hunting parties. Gets you a jump on the hunting parties, which is good.
Okay, so why am I taking the Lookout instead? The Lookout is, of course, trashing the estates, which is better than trashing the coppers. Adam is at least fair to that point. And so it's less, even though it's likely to cause a bad shuffle, but it's not as likely to cause a bad shuffle in my mind as the Lone is. And the Lookout, you have the option of playing it. So first off, it's trashing the estates. So in my mind, it's doing more for me early on. And no, it's not. I'm not going to hit 5 until like turn 5 or 6. I don't really care.
Yeah, it does more for your turn 5, turn 6 because it trashes the estates.
Right.
The Lone is doing more for your turn 3, turn 4 because it gives you the $1.
This is true.
Yeah.
So like, I also just don't assign a huge value to hitting 5 that early. I want to hit 5. I want hunting parties in the deck. They're great. I'd rather be thin. So the other thing that it comes down to is a few mid-game considerations between the Lookout and the Lone. One, eventually you're going to be wanting to trash both of these cards, right? They stop being good, both of them. And the Lookout has better trash for benefit stuff going on. You're going to be getting Necromancers in the deck and apprenticing it. You're going to be researching. They come out even there. But for me, it's mostly the Zombie Apprentice thing. And the other thing is that eventually you're going to be drawing what few coppers you have. And, well, not
Difference-
what few.
The difference between Lone and Lookout there, it doesn't matter, right? They both stop working in that case.
Well, not really, though, because you can
But
play
really.
Lookout. You can play Lookout before you've drawn a lot of your
Yeah,
cards.
and if
So,
if I have coppers in my deck that I can draw, I want to draw them so I can spend them and put Payload in the deck.
Yeah, but I'd rather
and I
just
think
sift
I
through
think
them
the
and
Lone is a
trash
card
one.
that's even worth keeping around. Like I don't even necessarily want to trash it because it like gives me $1, man. I love dollars.
That's true enough, but like, man, the Lookout is sifting through the coppers and trashing one. And I'm not talking about the point where you're drawing your deck just yet. Like, I mean, you do need to trash stop cards to get to make this dream happen.
I think I fall on Adam's side here because if Lookout and Lone trash at roughly the same rate, they're both non-terminal-ish, and they both trash one card, and
Yeah.
but Lone gives you $1. And if you're touting the sifting abilities of Lookout,
but Lookout's-
your opponent's playing Fortune Teller, you're getting that sifting ability anyway.
Well, that's true enough.
Lookout
but I'm
hard
not-
counters Fortune Teller.
My thing is that they
So
trash
does Lone.
they trash at the same rate early on, but they stop trashing at the same rate very quickly. The Lone stops trashing very well.
no,
The
I
Lookout-
disagree with
Lone
that.
seeks out the coppers, and Lookout, you're going to be too scared to play.
I not like the you have bad cards in your deck for long enough, but that usually by the time you're too scared to play your Lookout, you should have Zombie Apprenticed it a long time ago anyway. It's just like,
So this is a little bit of a different build that we're talking about.
yeah. And I also want to stress that like the difference between these two ended up like I strongly doubt it decided any games.
I
'Cause, like,
think
they're
it decided
very-
every single game. No, I don't think it matters all that much.
I think like these are doing such similar things. It's really hard to it's hard to isolate things like this when we're arguing about two things that have merits and they're this close together because like other things will decide the game.
Yeah, especially with your
Going
opening
first.
Lookout. Like, if you draw it on turn 3, it's going to be super amazing, right?
Right.
And if you don't draw it on turn 3, it's going to be pretty bad.
And the Lone, if you draw it in a way that skips estates and trashes coppers for a decent amount of time, that's super great. If you play it in a way that, like, you know, it finds your one silver or whatever, if you have a silver, I don't know.
Yeah, I
It's-
delay getting any silvers in the deck for a long time because it feels bad with Lone. Eventually, I do get it, but at that point, I'm drawing pretty much everything, and I just want Payload. So the Lone is, you know, it's just there at that point. And the Lookout, I don't think would be much better.
So I think we've pretty much gone into most of what this kingdom is and does. A couple of nombos in this kingdom, things that like I didn't think I thought were going to be a bigger deal than they were were both Stonemason and Beggar. Stonemason was great for the reasons it's always great, right? Like you hit 7
Just
and you get
empties
2
the
hunting parties.
piles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, I thought you were going to be doing tricks with it to, like, get a bunch of cards, Stonemason Platinums into provinces, maybe, I don't know, and, like, getting a bunch of Triumph points with that. Beggar, too.
but there's-
Beggar, like, you'd think, like, oh, Triumph Beggar, that's amazing. But, like, there's just better ways to do it, and you're, like, crippling your deck by doing, like, Triumph Beggar in a way that, like...
I mean, that's unique to this board, though, because there's no +2 actions.
Yeah.
And because Traveling Fair's there. If you had something else, if you didn't have Traveling Fair and you had more actions, Triumph Beggar would be a much bigger deal.
Okay, so
Potentially.
possibly, but I do question that because you'd be getting the beggars would be stop cards and like they could be talismans instead and like what.
I mean, Beggars are your payload at that point, but then you gotta deal with all the copper. So.
It's true. I mean, it's hard to say. You might be right.
I mean, Beggar's Terminal, that's a big deal here. You can't get Triumph huge turns with it. Obviously, Talisman with the abundance of plus buy was able to do some bonker stuff.
Now, if there was Will-O-Wisp in the kingdom,
Yeah,
all right,
that
so-
would change everything. Yeah. I was surprised by how good Necromancer was.
I was surprised when I was once I started playing the deck, I knew to get a Necromancer because I'm like, oh, Necromancer's amazing here. But before I started playing the deck, I wouldn't have like told you to buy Necromancer.
It looks
without
so
playing
innocent. But like one Zombie Apprentice, it's really good. It really helps you make up for Hunting Party not being a good card. Yeah, I said that. Because
It's-
like
in
you want to
this
draw
deck,
6
sure.
talismans, and Hunting Party sucks at that. But like you just draw everything else, and then you Zombie Apprentice something, and now I have 6 talismans in my hand, and I can win the game.
All right, I'm gonna say that it's not good, but it is the best way to do it. Because like There's no.
Yeah.
It's the only other draw you've got here other than research duration stuff. So yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
that doesn't draw 6 talismans.
yeah, it's less about Necromancer being really good than it is about like Necromancer filling this deficiency the board has otherwise.
Yeah, but like, that's what Necromancer does, man.
Yeah.
It's got them zombies. They do different things. It's thematic, right? Zombies do different things.
Zombies do different things.
Yeah.
Depends on the zombie
Dead?
lore. Yeah.
Yeah, in The Walking Dead, there's like fire zombies, and then
Well-
there's bog zombies and stuff.
So there's a difference between
Zombies aren't
like
my thing.
Yeah.
World War Z zombies and like Left 4 Dead zombies. Like Left 4
Yeah.
Dead zombies are special snowflakes.
Oh, there's that one movie where they're like really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Good talk.
yeah. So
Leave a comment in the comments section.
yeah,
Something like that.
yeah. So let's move on to the meaty pulp of our episode.
Yeah.
The Jake of the Adam sandwich.
The Jake of the Addams sandwich, as they say.
Pretty good.
So yeah.
So, I guess in tackling this topic, I don't remember who came up with the questions, if it was myself or the other Adam, but one of us came up with 3 questions to answer to help you figure out if you should continue building this higher payload deck.
Yeah.
So the 3 questions are: I've hit 8 for the first time. Now what? I drew my deck for the first time. What do I do? And my opponent bought their first province. What do I do?
So I'm gonna say that most, many, if not most, boards give you something to think about when you're looking at, how much do I delay greening versus when is it good to get a jump on points, and what kind of payload and deck control am I willing to wait to get before I start getting there. And a myriad of factors go into when and why you make the call to build more or pivot for points, but they lie at the heart of what we'd be thinking about when we're deciding to go for some kind of fast front-running strategy, or if we're trying to instead try to incorporate more extra gains, more VP chips, attacks, something that takes longer to set up but gives us more control over the game in the long run. A lot of the time that decision is obvious. You look at the kingdom and you're like, oh, this is a really powerful build, or oh, this is super fast money, and that decision is just made at the beginning of the game. But even then, you have to make sure your decisions are being informed by what your opponent is doing and how you can get the best advantage out of that.
I don't know, man. I like to put on my blindfold and just like shuffle my cards.
Yeah, some people just like to click cards and
Yeah. It's like,
that's
Cookie
nice
Clicker?
too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that, yeah. Only it's Dominion Clicker.
Yeah.
And then you get like an auto clicker. Anyway, you asked those 3 I'm not done trolling. So you asked those 3 questions, and I just thought the answer to every single one of them in my head was flip the table.
Flip the table.
My opponent bought their first province, flip the table.
I was gonna say resign, but yeah. So, but like those questions are, and like being able to react to them mid game. That's why bots can't play Dominion. That's why the better Kingdom Reader isn't always the better player. And I think it's most of what we're gonna talk about today.
Hashtag serendipity.
Hashtag namaste. Yeah.
Hashtag namaste. Yeah. Yeah. So these. Why don't we get to these 3 questions, or if you will, indulge me, the 3 seashells. Huh? It's not funny. Okay, great. So I've hit 8 for the first time.
We like to humor him sometimes, but there's a limit.
Ha ha ha.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. So I've hit 8 for the first time. What do I do?
Resign. No.
Well, I think the biggest thing to do, and this may sound obvious, but just look at what your deck is missing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not always the right call to buy a province, and I think that's just a theme throughout all of these questions.
Yeah, a lot of times when I say I had $8 in one buy, like, you can't afford a province, but like I think the more apt question to ask yourself is rather, what is the best card for my deck right now? Because you have 8 in one buy, and in most games that means you can buy any card you want and put it in your deck. You have all of the options.
Yeah.
So what's the best option?
I think that the key, if we're gonna get at the heart of what we mean by like a province isn't always the best option, I think like I've heard people imply that like you buy a cheaper card than you could afford and you're like wasting money. And I think it's important to remember that like that doesn't make any sense. Like you're not money doesn't get wasted in Dominion. Your money is this like abstract mechanic that helps you get the cards you want. It's like it's this thing. It's like you hit certain price points and you get a card at this point or lower. And extra gains make that more complicated for sure. But like you want to try to build efficiently to the point that you're splitting your buys up so you get multiple of the best cards you want like before you're hitting those big price points. But don't ever feel like you're wasting money by putting the best card for your deck in your deck.
There's this video of like these 4 people playing a game of Dominion. Oh man, I've told Jake this story. There's 3 dudes and there's a woman and they're playing Dominion and they're videoing it and they're doing a review of the game. And so the 3 dudes, you know, they all do their openings and it's turn 3 and like the 3 dudes, they all have 5 and you know they do their thing and no one questions anything. And then the woman, she has 6. And she's like, I'm going to buy this mountebank. It costs 5. And, like, yeah, normally you get, like, your mountebank over your first gold. This is pretty commonly accepted that this is, you know, a pretty good thing to do. And the men at the table are like, oh no. You generally want to spend all your money every turn. And they physically take the gold out of her hand, put it back, and physically, or the mountebank out of her hand, physically put the gold into her hand. And, like, it would just, like...
Yeah.
This is 2019. Like, I got hashtag triggered watching that. But like, so don't do that. Please don't do that. I mean, maybe if you have way too much money for the cards you want, that maybe you should feel bad about it at some point. But like, feel bad when the game's over. Look back at your play and be like, hey, could I have done something to maybe avoid this situation or maybe build more efficiently to take advantage of this? But that's a future use problem. Like, Go look at the decision you have now and make the best decision and move forward with that. Well, don't beat yourself up over it now. Beat yourself up over it later.
Also, don't like tell people not to do things they want to do in board games. Like seriously, that's kind of just a tabletop etiquette thing. If somebody wants to make a move, like don't tell them not to do the whatever. Go ahead.
This is America.
Yeah.
If I want to put gravy on my cards and eat it, let me put gravy on my f***ing cards.
If you own the cards, but
I don't care, man.
All right, there's a reason Adam's not allowed back in most game stores, but yeah. So
sorry, I got on a tangent there.
Yeah. So the other thing to think about when you're looking at this $8 hand that you've got and you're missing, you've only got that one buy. And Candlestick Maker's on the board, and it only costs 2, and you feel like, oh, I'm wasting a gold's worth of money here.
Sure.
Next turn, you can theoretically buy 2 cards that cost 4.
All right, one thing I want to pick at here is that this situation is valid that you've just talked about, where, like, you need the plus buy in your deck, and, like, so that plus buy is the best thing for your deck to get.
Yeah, we did assume that...
This is true if you're drawing your deck. But if you're not drawing your deck, then you need to actually start thinking about the distribution of your deck's money between this hand and next hand. So this thing that Adam just brought up, this situation where you're looking at like 9 money and you decide to take the woodcutter. If I'm drawing my deck, and I'm going to do that consistently, well, yeah, I need that extra gain. But if I'm looking at it and I'm choosing between like King's Court now or, the Candlestick Maker now, just because I don't have plus buy, I need to think like, well, what's my next hand look like? Because I can get this King's Court now. If my average hand can't produce enough money to get the King's Court, I should probably get the really expensive card now if I'm going to have the hand for it next turn, and I could just waste a little... I could just, use a crappier hand to get this card that like any hand could get, but I need.
Yeah, it's like that general principle. If you are having multiple turns before you shuffle, you want to plan those turns together because none of it really matters until you shuffle. It all gets shuffled in anyway.
Time measures and shuffles, yeah.
Yeah, just like that. But, I mean, this difference between multiple turns between shuffles and shuffling every turn or, drawing all of your important cards every turn. I mean, that's just a reason why going for a higher payload, or in this case, a higher deck control, building more and building a better deck. That's just a reason why this is really great. Because I would rather buy a good card, put it in my deck, and see that card's effect every turn than buy a good card and put it in my deck and see that card's effect every, 3 or 4 turns.
You'd rather increase
Screw
the
that.
quality of your turns by that much per turn rather than the difference between that and your average card, right?
Yeah,
But
man.
I do want to point out something here. When we're talking about the decision to buckle down and build more, or the decision to maybe pivot toward points, I want to come back and zoom out a little bit to an episode of Making Luck that Wandering Winder did on Salt of the Earth. He went into this sort of theoretical, abstract example of one player doing something, and we're going to say that we're going to call this guy Player A. And he's building this
A for Adam.
really slow, powerful deck that just scores hundreds of billions of points once it gets set up. He's doing something crazy, like he's playing labs and silvers and playing a nomad camp.
Whoa.
And he's buying 2 provinces in a turn, and
Whoa.
that's insane.
Slow down, player A.
Yeah, okay, so that's player A.
Chill out.
And then player 2 is instead, he's doing something else. He's getting silvers and he's salting the earth. And he's just salting out provinces. And he's going to try to really aggro end the game really quickly. So player A sees that what player 2 is doing. And he's looking at what's happening. The opponent's salting the provinces out. And he draws this hand of $10 and 2 buys. That's amazing! Okay. So Wandering Winder's point in the episode was that player A isn't committed to building this slow, monolithic, powerful deck to completion. He can take some points and overtake player 2's points lead, and then end the game on his own terms. But there's a little more to that here. So your best play might be to duck for points in that case, because you're reacting to what your opponent's doing. You had this plan of building more, and now you've got information that suggests that maybe you shouldn't. But it might also just be to buckle down on his original plan instead. And the things that you think about there are like, how quickly you've got that $10 2-buy hand. Like, how quickly could you get to double province? And like, what's your return on investment for building more? Are you gonna get those double province turns in a reasonable amount of time so that it still matters?
There's a lot of different things that you should be thinking if you hit 8, and you have the potential to buy everything. When I said you want to put your blindfold on, I was being sarcastic. Don't do that. Figure out how many turns do I have left? Do I need points now? Do I want to build? Is that going to pay off for me? Am I going to have the same points in 2 turns and have a better deck? Or not, or something else. That's fine.
And I guess where I was coming from with this whole plus buy thing was, in my experience, playing Dominion poorly, watching other people play Dominion poorly, it has been, you're trying to build this big, high payload deck, and so you're drawing all the cards, you're thin, you can do all the things, but then the thing keeping you from doing all the things is not realizing the power of plus buy, or gains, or whatever that is. And I think that's something that newer players struggle with, and I think it's something that, especially like mid-turn gains, or just gainers in general, even more experienced players struggle with, because the math gets very difficult as soon as you start gaining cards in the middle of your turn, or
I remember there was a tournament game that you and I were playing against each other, and there was one point you had built up really big, and Adam comes over and asks like, "Hey, how you guys doing?" And you kind of dejectedly look at him and say, "I just spent $11 on a woodcutter. That's how I'm doing."
Yep.
Yeah, so sometimes it's worth doing.
And
Who won that game?
I did.
Oh,
It's the
nice.
game where you pass me an estate with Masquerade.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
And
didn't
then
mean to
lost by
bring
a
that
point.
up.
Yeah.
It's all good. We're cool.
Anyway, you were saying?
What was I saying? Oh, I think my other point is that the plus buy cards are generally less glamorous than a lot of the other cards, at least in my book. at least they seem that way at first. Laboratory, I get to draw 2 cards and I get to do more stuff.
I love cards.
Village, I get to play more cards.
I love cards.
Woodcutter, I get to buy in $2.
Oh, I love cards.
So,
Nomad Camp.
Oh yeah,
For
Nomad Camp.
2019, it's Nomad Camp. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Woodcutter died
Yeah.
for our sins. Rip in peace, Woodcutter. We hardly knew you.
Yeah.
Well, I see a lot of people like their idea of the best turn you can possibly have is you buy a province. I mean, that's a fine turn, but there's a whole world out there, man. Like just this last kingdom, we were thinking, oh, the best turn I can have is I can buy a colony. No, the best turn you can have is to score 130 points. That's the best turn you can have, and that's better than a colony.
Yeah.
slightly.
It's like that strong bad where he's like, is my imagination broke? What's the best thing in the world? Beef stew. Yeah, it's broke. It's like that.
That
only,
was way too obscure, Adam.
only instead of beef stew, you're buying a province. Leave a comment in the comments section if you
Look,
remember
I got
that.
the reference, but this, you didn't need to go that deep.
Yes, I did, Jake. I definitely did. So yeah.
So the next, do we want to move on to the next
yes,
question?
please.
So the next question we have was, I drew my deck for the first time. What do I do? My answer for that is buy Windfall.
Oh, I was gonna say flip the table.
You have to. I use it design because I realize actually what's in my deck. I'm like, oh god, what have I been doing?
And no, this doesn't mean I drew my whole deck because I trashed everything out with Chapel and all I have are,
Is
you
a
know,
Chapel?
a Chapel.
Well, but
That's
like
rough, man.
I think it could mean that because like I've read some of the points you're gonna make and they apply to this situation too, right?
This is true.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, I'm refuting his points. He thinks
I
it
guess.
doesn't apply. It does apply.
I mean, Windfall is great, okay?
Yeah,
like, if I just drew my deck, I want 3 golds. Please and thank you. But anyway.
And I think that just brings up the point. Like, you can, if you're talking to a newer player, you can just point them to Windfall and say, look, drawing your deck is a good thing because there's a thing that is really good when you draw your whole deck.
But
Like, this is a thing that you want to do anyway, putting golds in your deck. So give you the goal
When
of
you can draw
draw your whole deck, and then you can have the gold. Like,
yeah, and that's actually illustrative because then you tell that new player the next time he plays, okay, now pretend every game has Windfall, and they're going to be on an okay track to get started, right? Like,
I
because
guess.
they're
I
gonna
mean-
they're gonna have the basic formula of draw your deck first, and then start thinking about cards that make it better when you do that.
yeah. And
In general, that's a good way to build a deck.
Yeah.
yeah. You just might have to inject a little bit of payload a little bit sooner.
It's okay, man. I'm not judging. Silver's there for you, man.
Silver is there for you.
And silver's a pretty good card.
Yeah, it combos with Nomad Camp really well.
Yeah.
But so like you've talked about before, where you draw your deck and then you ask yourself if you have all the payloads you need, right?
Yes, so that brings me to the next point is do you have all the payload you need? And so at the beginning of the game, you really do want to think about, okay, what is the best deck I can build here? Am I buying 1 province a turn? Am I buying 2 provinces a turn? Am I buying 3 provinces a turn?
55 provinces a turn.
And that's
so-
like in theory. What would be the best deck here if I have infinite time to build it? Yeah.
Right, but once you've drawn your deck, you can just look at your hand and say, okay, what can I buy? I only have, $6 in my hand. I need at least 8 to score points, but how many buys do I have? How much, action space do I have left in my hand? Those types of things.
I think it's
When you're bad at tracking your deck like I am, and this is one of the better ways you have of tracking your deck.
It really is.
Just say it.
Yeah, same for me. The other thing is that you can decide at the beginning of the game, like, I think this is a double province game for me. We'll see.
I've
But, like,
never decided that, but
well, you don't
yeah.
have to decide
Yeah.
it. Like, you can, like, feel it out, and then that gives you a basic guide for starting to build. And then once you have drawn your deck, that does kind of check a little box. It's like, okay, we've moved to this part of the game now. And that's where you look at a few things. Like, 1, what Adam was just describing. 2, what Adam was just describing. Which are like, things about your payload and, like, where you are right now. But also, look at what your opponent's doing. What in relation to it, like, what advantages do you have over them and how can you press those? Like, are they not as thin? Could you maybe start attacking them with an attack that's kind of bad, but, like, is better for you than them because you're going to play it every turn?
I know Jake says this a lot, but like that is actually really important. Like, I'm drawing my deck. I now have full control. I can really calculate. I can do very precise things at this point. I need to know what my opponent's doing.
Right. I almost don't exaggerate when I say I spend more time tracking my opponent's deck than I do my own. That may be a mistake, but like it is kind of my play style, and like I think it served me well to a huge degree. And like drawing your deck is kind of
this.
Well, drawing your deck is kind of the point where you get to like, turn your brain off of tracking your own deck a little bit and start paying more attention to your opponent.
Yeah, once I'm drawing everything, usually the only tracking I do is for the purposes of isolating exactly what I want to whine about.
Well, that's important to do at the beginning of the game. But
it's still
important at all phases of the game.
Yeah, identify what you want to
even if you're tracking nothing else about your deck, make sure you're tracking that at least.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth the mental capacity you take to do it. So, you draw your deck for the first time. There is this concept of overdraw. If you're looking for the best way to continue to build your deck while you're drawing it, you can think of things in terms of overdraw. Did I overdraw this turn? Is it, if I add Payload to my deck, like Adam suggested, am I going to continue to overdraw? Or maybe I need to put some draw on the deck as well. Or do I get a card that has both deck control and Payload components, like a Conspirator or something?
Or Grand Market.
Yeah. Like those guys, then I don't have to worry about striking this balance. So not only can it educate, your macro decisions of where do I want my deck to go, but also, these same kind of things can educate the micro decisions you make. What is the best card or cards for me to add to my deck right now? So I can continue this whole deck paradigm that I've just entered myself into. And while continuing to build in the most efficient way possible. And if you'll allow me to rant for just a moment.
Yeah, I can't stop you if I
unrelated
try.
podcast. You got a great point, Jake. So, drawing your deck, it's really good. Wandering Winter had a mini-sode that has been published, the whole deck paradigm, explaining a lot of the details of why this is the case. A lot of people, they say the word engine to talk about.
Are you going to bleep that out? Or?
I might. I haven't decided yet. They use that word to describe what I think should just be drawing your deck, and here's why. Thing number one of the inspirations for this episode topic to begin with, that's an intimidating word. Someone tells you to build the engine in Dominion, and to someone who doesn't already know what that means, it can be a problem. And I have a whole rant article about this. I won't go into too much detail, but it's intimidating, and it can cause people to feel like they can't build the deck and then just go back to something that's safe, which is a little rough. But the thing is, drawing your deck is an actual instructive thing that is defined based on mechanics that the game tells you what they are, right? I drew all my cards. My deck and my discard are empty. I know what that means if I know the rules of Dominion. I don't have to talk online to people and have them just tell me, oh, it's an engine. And I don't have to argue with people about what an engine is. Or does it need a village?
Nothing's stopping you, though.
Well, he's got a point, but I'm not going to deal with any of that crap. Engines don't have to have villages. Engines don't have to have draw. Engines don't have to have anything. What does that even mean? If I draw my deck, not only am I explicitly knowing what I'm talking about, but now I know what effect that has on the way I build my deck and the way I adjust my strategy to get to the point where I draw my deck and then do a thing that's different and amazing because I drew my deck. When I draw my deck, I add a card to the deck and I feel 100% of the impact on that card, provided I can still draw it. That's amazing. You should totally do that. It's really, really good. And if you can do that, do it. That's really good. You don't have to worry about what's an engine. Is this an engine? Build the engine. What does the engine do? Draw your deck.
I just call everything money.
Yeah.
Making Luck, a mechanics podcast.
Right.
Don't worry about it. Anyway, thanks for allowing me.
Coming back to the question you asked earlier, which is you drew your deck for the first time, and what do you do?
Sure.
Usually the question you're trying to answer is, am I putting more payload in, or am I putting more deck control in, right?
Or do I get a province? Raw!
Or am I scoring points? Yeah.
I don't think you ask as much about deck control, because you've proven that you have the deck control, right?
And that's something I agree with a lot of the time, and I think the answer you usually settle on is start adding payload or start scoring points, but it's worth noting, why did you draw your deck? And are you going to actually replicate that next turn? Because you are also talking about putting stop cards in your deck, and the big thing that I want to try to answer is my turn quality and deck control, is it binary, or is it spectral?
Yeah.
Am I
Spectral and binary.
am I playing a deck where I start with a city quarter in my hand and I kick off and I have like $20, and if I don't start with a city quarter in my hand, I don't kick off and I have $5? Or am I playing a deck that like, oh, okay, those bottom cards are labs, and because of that I didn't get $4, but I still have 16 or whatever.
Yeah.
So like, what kind of deck am I playing? How likely am I to dud? What happens if I do? Can I afford to dud? Things like that. So like sometimes you draw your deck and you do consider adding more deck control at that point, but
I think
these are the things you think about.
The big thing, the big time that comes up the most for me. Let's say there's an attack. I really need to make sure I play every single turn on my opponent.
Yeah, like Fortune Teller.
Yeah, like Fortune Teller. Like, that's the point
like
where I
Fortune
would
Teller.
consider maybe overbuilding, quote, overbuilding or overdrawing to the point where I am definitely going to play that card every turn. Or I'm definitely going to buy Scrying Pool number 6 because I need to just make sure I have one in my opening hand, and then I can have a turn, right? It's these kind of the binary things where the success of my turn is measured more by, did I find this card? Rather than did I find all of my cards.
Yeah.
That's the point where I would consider overbuilding. But, that's not all the time, and, you're looking at Payload or you're looking at green cards for the remainder of those situations, yeah.
You do have to win the game eventually, yeah.
No.
The last question I was gonna, or the last point here I was gonna cover was, you need to know, like, how many provinces you're expecting to gain per turn, because there's a limit, a functional limit to how useful that is.
Sure.
2 provinces a turn is good. 3 provinces a turn is great. 4 provinces, you don't really need to go there, because as soon as you've done 3 provinces a turn, it's going to be real hard for your opponent to come back. And I think you've even talked about this on the podcast before. Yeah. And so keep in mind that you don't need to build to 3 provinces a turn necessarily, especially if you're going to kick off. If you kick off twice at 2 provinces a turn, you're good.
Sure. The other question you go into there is like, once I start adding green cards to the deck, how sustainable is it, right? So like you said, you don't really need to go there with the 4 province turn. Sometimes you do. Like, sometimes you're building a deck that is kicking off, like, hugely, but...
Yeah, this is detailed in our Mega Turns episode.
Yeah,
we go to a lot of detail about that. We'll link in the show notes.
Yeah, but if the deck stops functioning after you put those green cards in, then maybe you needed to get 5 or whatever, but sure.
I mean, if 4 equals win the game because it equals 8, then do that.
Yeah,
but
right.
And some of this, I think, leads us into the last question, which is, my opponent just bought their first province, what do I do?
Yeah.
Flip the table.
Flip the
Resign.
table.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say don't panic and carry a towel.
Calmly resign.
Calmly flip the table.
Calmly resign.
Yeah.
So I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, why did they buy a province? Did they buy a province because they hit 8 for the first time?
We just talked about that.
In which case, you're probably okay.
Well, yeah.
Or are they starting to green because they've kicked off and they've bought 2 provinces this turn, and now you've entered a different realm, I guess.
A lot of it. It depends on a lot, and identifying what that province leaving the pile actually means is key. Does that province leaving the pile mean that we have transitioned into the end game, and that end game is going to come whether I want it to or not? Or does it mean that my opponent just crippled his deck with a stop card he can't accommodate? And, you look at things like that. Like, does the opponent have the ability to accommodate all 8 provinces in his deck if I let him? Does the opponent getting 5 provinces win the game because the provinces are the viable VP and duchies don't really get you there?
Duchies are stupid.
Does the opponent have the ability to mill provinces, like without putting them out of the supply, without putting them in his deck, like with Butcher and stuff like that? So, or, did the opponent just buy a province and now I have more time to build? Because he slowed his deck down by putting a province in it.
I guess the only thing I'll add there is that if you've overbuilt, like I tend to do sometimes, even if your opponent has 5 provinces, the duchies aren't necessarily going to hurt you if you've built your deck control so big that now they've choked so hard that they can't even buy a duchy, and now you can just pile out the duchies and then clean up the provinces and you're good.
Sure.
I've had that happen multiple times, and you can win that way. It's not great, but it happens.
Yeah, and that implies that you're reacting to your opponent. You probably hit 8 at some point, and you're like, well, wait, taking this province out of the supply is their win condition, not mine.
Right.
So you play to your own, not
It's
theirs.
surprisingly difficult to chew through 8 provinces by yourself.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes into, are there other sources of VP in the kingdom that you could lean on instead? We've talked before about identifying what the win conditions in the kingdom are, and we've talked about the 50% VP win condition, where, or at least viable VP, where like they have gotten to this point where they have 4 provinces in their deck, and it's like you could start scoring provinces, but they've got half of them, and the provinces are the only good way to score points. Well, like, if there's something else that they could focus on instead, like some alt VP, then that 50% doesn't, like, mean anything, because you can focus harder on something else.
Yeah, you definitely build and play that deck a lot differently if you're aiming for 8 provinces, for example, versus 4.
Yeah.
Because, you need to drain all the provinces to win.
Is it possible at all to win the game without having a single province in your deck? And if the answer to that question is yes, you play differently.
Yeah,
True.
and you also, if you're going for the provinces, you play differently against someone who's doing something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, both sides should be adapting to this. This
Yep.
this is taking off the blindfold. Something I seldom do, but I guess is probably a good idea.
So I think the biggest thing, though, is you got to recognize your deck controllability relative to your opponent's deck controllability. Because if their deck controllability is higher than yours and they've started greening, you might still need to build a little bit more, because if you start dipping for green at the same time, you're just going to lose, because they're going to be able to weather their green and you won't, and then you'll just lose. So and at the same time, if your opponent isn't as far ahead as you are on their deck control, it might be the right decision to also green, because now they're just hurting themselves and you can accelerate the end of the game.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm like behind in terms of deck control, one of the recourse, or one of the forms of recourse that I have,
Resigning.
besides that, is to push greening early. I would generally say that like a deck control advantage going into greening is, I guess, weaker than having a payload advantage. Like, if I'm slightly more reliable, but still not 100% as we start to take on provinces, then this guy who didn't build as much but got the jump on greening, then maybe they have an advantage.
Yeah.
But if I can get more points on a turn than they can, then I'm in better shape as we
better
go
endgame
into...
control.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's another big aspect of plus buy. Even when the game is about speed, and many games are about speed, even when the game isn't about building up to this huge like double province turn, if I can put plus buy or some extra gain of some kind, it doesn't matter what, into my deck, and
Even just knowing that your opponent has the ability to buy 2
Yeah.
provinces puts a ton of pressure on
or
you.
even trash one by one,
Or,
like
yeah.
even something like transmogrify. If I didn't lose too much pace by putting that into the deck, because like the plus buy card, like Adam said, not Adam, but Adam.
Yeah.
Like he said, they're not too glamorous. They tend not to do a ton other than that plus buy. But like if I can do that without losing too much pace, like you just said, like my opponent has to play around that. If I can just have a transmogrify on the mat, my opponent can't leave 2 provinces in the supply. He's not safe unless there's 3, or unless I called my transmog some other time. And now he's got this extra thing to play around unless he has his own to answer it.
So, like, all of this stuff we're talking about, I mean, these are all options. You have decision to make. You have different paths you can choose. And if you don't build a deck that can do more than, a province per turn if I get lucky and find enough money, because I just bought a bunch of golds and hope to get provinces. Like, if all you do is build that deck, you don't get to have any of these choices. So if you're playing a deck that doesn't aim that high, that, if you didn't commit to the higher payload deck, here you are in the end game. You have one choice. Hope I buy a province, and that's it.
Yeah.
And if you do this other stuff, if you build a little more and you commit to this higher payload deck, you have all of these options. And the only way you lose is if every single one of those options loses. Now, sometimes that's the case.
Yeah.
But, man, I like my chances if I have 6 different choices, because maybe at least one of them wins.
Like we've talked before, like there's this myth that money decks are slow. and it's 100% a myth. They're not slow, not comparative to other things you could be doing. What they
Gets that first province light.
I've lost to a lot of money decks.
Yeah, like, because they're not slow. It's not... When money is played well, money is quite fast compared to a lot of decks that people build. And the thing is that what is their weakness? Their weakness is lack of flexibility. And so, like, if you can... Even if money is the fastest thing there, that flexibility... Is it the fastest thing there by enough that flexibility doesn't lose you the game in some other way? Yeah.
And it has to be. Or else
Usually,
don't do it.
Yeah, right?
It's like a tall order, man.
Silver's kind of good.
It's a good card.
Yeah.
It only costs 3. Hello. Please nerf. Hashtag 2019.
Yeah, nerf so. Well, they did with Patron.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. Nice.
It's a silver, basically.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was. I think that was it for my opponent bought their first province, right? Anything else you guys wanted to get to?
The only thing I had were things that I've used personally to help break the habit, I guess, more of playing these big money decks, or from, I guess, turning away from the middle of the game. I'm sorry, I said the word, didn't I? Turning away from the higher payload deck.
Hey, we found it. We found his curse word. I'm just gonna get a bleep noise.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
this is exciting. What do you want your sensor noise to be?
What do I want? I don't know. What are my options?
Anything except the stuff that's already in use.
I don't know.
You just have a clip of my voice.
Why don't you just say the F word to be safe? All right. So what are these tips that you do?
So the things that I've done, things like don't let yourself buy gold. Aim to draw your whole deck. Aim to end the game with none of your starting cards. If you're having trouble with the concept of trashing, just like make it. This might be more useful. Some of these things, if you're trying to instruct someone else on how to get better.
Somebody who's like not super familiar with how deck builders work.
Right. Any specific combinations that you've never tried before, like you've never played a double tactician deck and tacticians on the board, go for it. Just give it a try. So a lot of these things are very board dependent. Like you're not going to be able to not buy gold on every board. You're not going to be able to draw your whole deck on every board. So you'll have to make sure that it's something, evaluate the situation and make sure it's something that is somewhat feasible. But at least it gets you the feeling of what it's like to play a deck that's, highly dense in actions, or play a deck that doesn't have any coppers or estates in it, or help you learn how to play around alternative victory points. So when I'm saying don't buy a province, you're going to have to look at a board that has something like Fairgrounds or Vineyard on it. Something like that, where it's easy to go for the alternate victory point, or maybe not easy, but it's something you can do, and it forces your opponent to now have to buy all 8 provinces.
Yeah.
So I guess these are just things that I'd say go hard at them now, and then figure out how to dial them back later after you've experienced what it's like.
Yeah, like you really have no idea what the potential of these kind of things is unless you just go for it. I don't really know of another way to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, you can do the calculations, but like the calculations, of course, have limited utility unless you have the experience to know where they do and don't apply. Like you can give me what is the math on the moves that are like.
Well, you can give the math to someone, and that's not convincing. Like I can say every time you trash an estate, that's one more card you get to draw every turn for the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's like gaining a lab, which is worth $5. So you can give it $5 worth of value, and now you can compare that to whatever you bought on this turn. And if it's not $5 more, but anyway, that's a lot harder to buy than just. It's like when I tell Jake that there's a 70% chance I hit 5 with a fortune teller loan opening, and he's like, "No!"
It's less than. It's 50.
Like that.
Yeah.
Less than 50.
Yeah.
55.
Yeah, it's less than that too.
I'm sure it is, Jake. So yeah, that was a podcast. That was meaty.
About a card game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Game. Speaking of card games, we have a card game to play.
Oh yeah, is it?
Is it Thunderstone?
Uh,
Pinochle?
Hearts.
Huh?
Ascension.
Go Fish?
So it's a board of Dominion.
Egyptian
now.
rat screw.
We do have to play Dominion, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so there's a kingdom that we're gonna play.
I'll read it.
That
Go for it,
sounds
Adam.
okay. You could.
Okay, you read it, Jake.
No, I don't want to.
Alright, so this kingdom has Coin of the Realm.
I think Adam should read it.
Coin of the Realm, Peasant, Wishing Well, Baron, Ironmonger, Priest, Butcher, Cash, Groundskeeper, King's Court, and we have Salt the Earth, and Silos. One more time for our audio-only listeners. Coin of the Realm, Peasant, Wishing Well, Baron, Ironmonger, Priest, Butcher, Cash, Groundskeeper, King's Court, and we have Salt the Earth and Silos.
So, why do you think we chose this kingdom?
Because I'm looking at it, I have no idea what to do.
That's a good sign. That's always a good sign when we're looking at these. Is when it doesn't immediately jump out at you. We've been talking about the decisions of when to build more and how much you want to build versus when you need to pivot away and start reacting to the situation you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think part of it's because you put King's Court in there. And so
He forced in Salt the Earth.
Yeah,
I know, but we
forced
ended
in
up
Salt
with King's Court.
We did end up
So
with
King's Court drives you towards looking towards one of these higher payload decks, just naturally.
Kinda.
Yep.
Yep. But there's stuff going on here.
Uh-huh. Yep. You can trash your cards. Priest is really good. I
Okay.
want to open with it.
So here's the thing. There's the potential to build up really huge with King's Court, like you said, but also Groundskeeper. Those are two things that push me toward building.
Dat Groundskeeper Baron synergy.
But there's... you do probably end up putting a Baron in the deck at some point, but you're not... I don't think you do, actually. Never mind. Anyway, so...
I mean,
But
need
there's
plus
a-
5 from somewhere.
There's other stuff
You
to
don't-
be
You
thinking...
don't tell me what to do.
There's Peasant. Peasant's everything. And also, I don't know if you need plus
Whoa,
5.
did
You've
you
got-
just say peasant is everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
You've also you also don't necessarily need plus 5. You've got Butcher. So
Baron.
I don't know, maybe, but like the thing is, there's also Butcher and there's Salt the Earth. So these are two things that are notorious for putting a lot of pressure on the end game. Now, obviously, just like salting provinces mindlessly until they're gone is a bad idea.
Seems bad, yeah.
Yeah, because your opponent can build up with like reasonable payload and like
You get like
outscore
one
you.
province and then GG.
Sure, but like then we've also got Butcher, so maybe it's viable to build some but build less and pressure provinces on somebody who's trying to like take their time and build up a little more. I don't know.
I think you're going to want the plus 5 from Baron because then you can start applying pressure with Salt the Earth, and you can force an end game situation pretty quickly.
That's if you're double salting, but I'd rather province salt and like I don't know.
If you're King's Courting Barons, you can just run down estates and then salt the rest of them.
How you
Or buy
drawing
the
all
rest of
that?
them.
How
What?
you drawing all that?
I'm not drawing all that. Ironmonger. Wishing Well.
Peasant
Court.
man, teacher.
That seems so slow. I'm gonna get Silos. I'm gonna skip Peasant. I'm skipping Peasant, yeah. And I'm gonna get Silos. And I'm going to open with a Priest. And what's my other open? I don't know. I'll figure it out.
You should get a peasant.
I'm gonna get Butcher really early on. I'm probably gonna get a second Butcher pretty early on. I'm probably getting a King's Court or two. But for the most part, I'm gonna try to get a points lead, an advantage on... You know, I'm going to have that initial deck control advantage because my opponent is building something slower if they are. And
What are you butchering?
estates into stuff. And then eventually I'm butchering province into province. And I'm going to pressure down these piles. And I don't think that trying to build up is actually going to give you too much of an advantage.
I think you get a peasant. I think that it's so the only source of draw on the board other than peasant up to teacher for the card token is King's Court. You have to King's Court, and then there's +1 card sources here. So if you want to increase your hand size, other than King's Court, you have to get the Peasant, the card token. I think that's going to be enough of a threat, and I don't think the Peasant takes away from what you're doing along the way enough to say that you don't want it.
Yep. I think that there are better options than the Peasant. I could be sold to build a lot on this board, but I don't think that the Peasant is actually that quick of a means of doing it. And I don't think it's really worth it in the end either. I mean, the Disciples... Okay, if I'm going to get a Peasant, I'm probably stopping at Disciple at the very least. I'm probably not getting the Teacher.
I think the thing is, it's easy enough for the person who is building up to grab a Butcher and do some of the same things that you're doing while also building.
But that's the thing, is I'm saying the opposite. I think it's easier for... Well, I'm saying the same thing. I'm saying, like, it's easy for the person who is building with, like, Butcher to do whatever it is the Peasant player is trying to build up to, but do it more efficiently because they're not stopping along the way for Peasant.
How do you not stop along the way for Peasant? So here's my thing.
Okay, Disciple is maybe a reason to go for Peasant. Teacher's definitely not.
Salt the Earth means you have to pay attention to what your opponent's doing, and you have to be able to react quickly and adapt. The way you do that is by having a thin deck, right? You want to trash starting cards so that you can have some flexibility. Oh, my opponent's doing this, I can react.
You need to trash estates, but Silo's kind of like...
I think you want to trash the coppers for absolute sureties.
You probably want to trash some coppers, like if you have the chance, but like it's not a priority.
It's a priority. It's definitely a priority. And now that I'm thinning my deck, I mean, I want the silos. It helps accelerate me. Probably get it. I don't know, turn 3, turn 4 or something.
I'm for sure getting the silos. It's no question.
But I still want to trash the coppers. And now that I have this thin deck, or even with the silos without the thin deck, like Peasant loves that. You just grab a Peasant on a turn where, I'm going to want this buy. Right? I can make $10,000 billion with Priest. Like, if I King's Court a Peasant, now I'm getting 4 of whatever card I want, and I win the game. Like, I really think that you don't lose that much by going for Peasant. But then you also have this long-term threat, like the Peasant's growing up, and then eventually, now I can draw every card ever. Now I can have all of the buys ever. I can King's Court Priest, or I can get Groundskeepers and draw a whole bunch of stuff. Like, I definitely think you want the Peasant.
Maybe I could be sold that getting Disciple is good enough. The Peasant is worth...
How far the Peasant graduates is not clear, because it depends very much on what your opponent does.
I don't think that you get the Teacher, because I think that the Disciple is just a better card at like every phase of the game for you, no matter what your opponent is doing.
But you get King's Court.
That's a really strong statement.
You could be gaining King's Courts with your Disciple.
I mean, normally when you go for Peasant, you probably want to do a lot of them. That's pretty common. But, you want multiple Disciples if you want that. Which is fine. Multiple Disciples is okay. You can King's Court a Disciple, or Disciple a King's Court. You can do all sorts of great stuff. I don't know right now. It depends on what my opponent does, how far the Peasant goes. But having the threat of putting a card token on something seems really good.
Seems fine.
Gives me more options. And if I have more options...
My thinking is that the game is going to be effectively over by then.
Well, I don't know,
You get that card token out, and I think like if I give you more than one turn with that card token in play, I've lost for sure. But I don't think I will.
But what you can do is you can end the game on a loss before that happens,
right, I can resign.
You will be right.
I can resign. No, but I think that I don't think that you're going to have that card token for more than a turn. And I don't even think you're going to have it for a turn. I think I'm going to at least effectively end the game, if not outright end it on you,
maybe
before that happens. The silos might be your saving grace, but it helps me too. So, we'll see.
Yeah?
We'll see.
I make no promises, but I'm pretty sure I'm opening with Priest and Peasant here.
Pretty sure I'm opening. I'm going to say, like, Priest Silver or Priest Wishing Well.
If you hate Peasant, I would get the Wishing Well over the Silver.
I think it's the Wishing Well.
Helps find that Priest.
I'd be doing Priest Peasant.
Yeah, man. Well, let us know what you think. Leave a comment in the comments section. If you're still listening to the podcast, if you're watching it on YouTube, comment section. If you're not, you can head on over to adamhorton.com. There's links there to a forum, Discord channel, all of our contact information. You can get in touch with us. Let us know what you think. What would you do on this board? Do you like the podcast? Do you like... who's the most handsome host we have right here.
I thought you were going to say who's the most handsome Adam that we have here.
Who's the most handsome Adam? We'd love to hear from you.
We all know it's Wandering Winter.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Who's the second most handsome Adam, aside from Wandering Winter?
Other than Wandering.
Yeah, other than Wandering Winter. We'd like to hear from you and, all that good stuff. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for letting me crash your podcast.
Yeah, no problem.
No.
I mean, a lot
can't be any worse than we make it every week.
there's a number of people who want to be on the podcast. And I've told them, if you show up at my house, I'll probably let you on the podcast. And
That's about all I did.
yeah, and that's about it, really. That's fine.
It's usually all I do, too.
Yeah. This is not... Okay, let me be clear. This is not an invitation for any of you to just show up at my house. Let me be clear about that. And if you wake up the baby while he's sleeping, we're going to have some words.
If you wake up me while I'm sleeping...
Oh, man. Don't do that.
If you wake up me, kudos to you. I don't wake up.
Nah.
Yeah, man. Anyway, thanks for listening to Making Love.
Yeah.
Is this where we say more funny B-roll?
Yeah, it's usually where we would. Yeah.
All right, so we've got... wait, which direction do I read this?
Just whatever, man.
Up
it's
and
fine.
down. Like you read from the middle outward.
Okay, so we've got Beggar, Stonemason, Fortune Teller, Lone, Lookout, Necromancer,
Doing it in the wrong
Reason. What do you mean I'm doing it in the wrong order?
I didn't say anything.
Yeah, f*** you, man.
So we have the cards Beggar, Stone.
You got him, Jake. I hope you're happy with
This
yourself.
isn't my fault.
This is going in the blooper reel. This is 100% your fault. What are
Okay,
you talking about?
just because it's my fault doesn't mean you have to go out and say things like, Jake,
Okay.
don't do that.
All right,
Does this
you gotta
usually take this many takes?
point.
No.
Okay.
But usually we just roll with whatever footage we cobble together.
Okay.
We just
So
leave
we've
it
got-
in mistakes.
Yeah.
So we've got Beggar, Stonemason, Fortune Teller, Lone.
I'm just saying you're doing great. I did the opposite of what I did last time. Do you want encouragement or not?
I don't know.
All right. Oh, sorry. That part's probably got to go out.
Woo! All right.
It is sweet.
It's good podcast so far. We're doing great, guys. Sweet.
So we have Beggar, Stonemason.